You trust your engine with everything: your ride, your safety, your freedom. But some motors break that trust in the worst ways. These are the 12 most infamous failures in motorcycle history. Stick around till the end, because number 1 still haunts collectors to this day. Number 12. Harley-Davidson Shovelhead. There are engines that build a legacy, and engines that nearly tear one apart. Introduced in 1966, the Shovelhead was meant to replace the Panhead and usher in a new era of American riding. It featured a displacement range from 1,214 to 1,340 cubic centimeters and produced approximately 65 horsepower and 75 pound-feet of torque. This engine was air-cooled with a pushrod V-twin layout, and while it offered serious low-end grunt, it came at the cost of overheating, leaks, and relentless vibration. The braking system typically included a single disc up front and a drum in the rear, which was standard for the time but lacked modern stopping power. Suspension setup used telescopic forks in the front and dual shocks in the rear, providing adequate support for straight-line cruising but little confidence in aggressive corners. The Shovelhead's average wet weight, depending on the model, hovered around 650 to 700 pounds. Seat height varied but generally settled around 26 to 27 inches. Starting prices when new were around $3,700 in the early 1970s, but the real cost came later. During the American machine and foundry years, quality control fell apart. Owners complained of loose tolerances, mismatched components, and inconsistent engine builds. The Shovelhead earned a reputation for vibration that would shake bolts loose and rattle foot pegs into submission. Many riders joked it had a built-in self-oiling system, thanks to persistent gasket leaks and blow-by oil. What should have been an evolution became a wrenching ritual. Riders carried toolkits not for emergencies, but for routine stops. Long trips were measured in quarts of oil, not miles. And though the Shovelhead still has its loyalists, its problems were too big to ignore. For every mile of thunderous torque it delivered, it left a mess of oil stains and headaches in its wake. Number 11. Yamaha Virago 750. This was supposed to be the middleweight cruiser that gave riders affordable access to V-twin charm. But the Virago brought a different kind of legacy, one of heat, hesitation, and headaches. The engine was a 74.9 cubic centimeter air-cooled V-twin, producing around 55 horsepower and 47 pound-feet of torque. It featured a 5-speed transmission, single overhead camshaft, and relied on a single-disc front brake with a drum rear. Suspension included conventional forks up front and dual shocks in the rear. Its dry weight came in around 500 pounds with a seat height of approximately 28 inches. At launch, the Virago retailed for roughly $3,600. The issues began early. Its starter system was one of the most notoriously unreliable designs in cruiser history. Riders dealt with weak engagement, failed solenoids, and grinding starts that left them stranded more than once. The problem persisted for years across multiple revisions, leading many to rebuild or replace components before the first oil change. Performance wasn't the engine's strong suit either. It offered smooth, low-end pull, but anything beyond 70 miles per hour made the engine feel strained. The throttle often delivered uneven power with noticeable flat spots and erratic surges. Handling at speed was twitchy, making long rides uncomfortable. But the worst offender was heat. The rear cylinder, tucked behind the front and poorly ventilated, turned into a furnace on warm days. Riders regularly reported burned inner thighs and discomfort during slow traffic. Combined with awkwardly routed exhaust and forward foot controls, comfort dropped sharply. Electrical gremlins added to the frustration. Charging issues, fluctuating idle, and sudden electrical failures were common. What began as a promising cruiser ended up as a lesson in what happens when reliability is overlooked. The Virago had charm, but charm only goes so far when riders are fighting to start their engine, battling heat, and second-guessing every shift. If one of these engines gave you hell, or you barely escaped owning one, hit like and share your story in the comments. You're not alone. Number 10. Kawasaki Vulcan 2000. When the Vulcan rolled onto the scene in 2004, it made one thing clear. Kawasaki wasn't afraid to go big. This was the largest V-twin engine ever put into a production motorcycle at the time, with a monstrous displacement of 2,500 cubic centimeters. It produced an eye-popping 116 horsepower and 141 pound-feet of torque. The braking system included dual front discs with 4-piston calipers and a single rear disc, which helped rein in the bike's enormous bulk. Suspension duties were handled by telescopic forks in the front and a preload adjustable rear monoshock. Wet weight came in at just over 850 pounds, and the seat height measured around 26 8/10 inches. Starting price was roughly $14,000. The engine's numbers were stunning, but the real-world experience was less impressive. That brute force came with drawbacks. Overheating was common in stop-and-go traffic, especially in warm weather. The heat radiating off the cylinders and exhaust pipes turned red lights into sweat boxes, particularly for riders caught without airflow. Despite its massive torque, the power band peaked early and flattened fast. The initial surge in first and second gear was thrilling, but by third gear, the engine felt dull. It didn't accelerate. It lumbered. And once moving, it handled like a freight train with flat tires. Cornering was sluggish, low-speed maneuvering was work, and parking lot turns demanded planning and muscle. Long highway rides exposed more flaws. Vibration from the large displacement engine crept in at speed, and the cramped engine bay made maintenance a chore. Accessing spark plugs or adjusting the final drive belt wasn't quick or simple. The Vulcan tried to win hearts by being the biggest, but in the process, it lost what matters most: balance. Big torque couldn't save it from being bloated, hot, and awkward. The bike proved once and for all that bigger doesn't always mean better. Every tool and riding essential we trust is down in the description. Don't miss it. Number 9. Suzuki RE5. In the mid-1970s, the RE5 looked like a machine from the future. Suzuki bet big on rotary engine technology, hoping to revolutionize the motorcycle world. At the heart of the bike was a single-rotor Wankel engine displacing 497 cubic centimeters. It generated 32 horsepower and 38 pound-feet of torque. The RE5 featured a single front disc and rear drum brake system. Suspension was handled by standard telescopic forks and dual rear shocks. Wet weight hovered around 560 pounds, and seat height stood at about 31 inches. The launch price was approximately $3,200. But while the concept dazzled, the execution fell flat. The engine ran hot, so hot that Suzuki had to implement a liquid cooling system, a rare and expensive addition at the time. Even then, engine temperatures climbed dangerously under load, especially during city riding. The power delivery was uninspiring. Throttle response felt soft, and the engine needed to be revved hard just to produce modest results. Acceleration was slow, and the bike lacked the punch riders expected from what was marketed as a futuristic machine. The rotary's exhaust note, more reminiscent of a lawnmower than a motorcycle, only added to the disconnect. Styling was equally divisive. The bike's dashboard resembled something out of a science fiction movie, with a cylindrical gauge cluster and space-age accents. Some riders loved it, most didn't. The complexity of the design didn't help as maintenance became more difficult and parts availability quickly became a concern. Fuel economy struggled, averaging just over 30 miles per gallon. For a motorcycle with such modest performance, that was hardly excusable. And unlike piston engines, the RE5 offered little mechanical familiarity to shops or owners. The RE5 wasn't just a flawed bike, it was a reminder that innovation without rider benefit is just noise. Its sci-fi looks couldn't mask its real-world problems. What began as a bold experiment ended as a cautionary tale. Number 8. Yamaha TX 750. The early 1970s were a time of innovation and risk-taking in motorcycle engineering, and Yamaha aimed to lead with the introduction of the TX 750. At the center of this machine was a 743 cubic centimeter air-cooled 4-stroke parallel twin engine, built around a unique balancing system called the Omni-Phase Balancer. It delivered approximately 63 horsepower and 48 pound-feet of torque. Braking was managed by a single front disc and a rear drum, which was typical for the period. The suspension consisted of conventional telescopic front forks and twin rear shocks. Wet weight sat near 525 pounds, with a seat height of about 31 inches. When new, the TX 750 started at around $2,400. On paper, Yamaha had a winner. The omni-phase balancing system used counter-rotating shafts to reduce vibration, an ambitious solution to a common problem. But the innovation quickly turned into a liability. The balancer chain stretched over time, throwing off timing and bringing back the very vibrations it was meant to eliminate. Worse, it disrupted oil flow, introducing air bubbles into the lubrication system and starving the engine of vital oil pressure. The consequences were severe. Bearings wore prematurely, cylinder heads overheated, and top-end failure became common. Many engines failed well before their intended service intervals, even with regular maintenance. Riders began to avoid pushing the bike to its top speed of around 105 miles per hour, fearing catastrophic failure under load. Even basic reliability became questionable. Valve adjustments were frequent, oil changes required extra scrutiny, and early models demanded constant mechanical attention. The engine didn't just underperform, it consumed rider trust with every mile. Fuel economy averaged 38 miles per gallon, but it came with a high cost in upkeep. The TX 750's biggest problem wasn't a lack of power, it was a design flaw at the heart of the engine. What Yamaha intended as a smooth, touring-friendly twin ended up as one of the most unreliable motors of its time. The Texas 750 was bold, but boldness alone isn't enough. When the core of your engine collapses under its own ambition, there's nowhere left to go but the shop. Number 7. Hyosung GT 650R. From a distance, the GT 650R looked ready to play with the big names. Its styling echoed the Suzuki SV series, and its specs seemed promising for a budget-conscious sport bike. But under the fairing sat a 647 cubic centimeter liquid-cooled V-twin engine that never quite delivered. It claimed 75 horsepower and 47 pound-feet of torque. Braking was handled by dual front discs and a single rear disc. Suspension used standard telescopic forks up front and a rear monoshock, neither of which inspired much confidence at speed. Wet weight came in at roughly 490 pounds and the seat height was about 31.5 inches. Starting price was approximately $5,800, putting it within reach of new riders. The problems began at ignition. Throttle response was inconsistent. Some bikes hesitated on roll-on while others surged unpredictably. Fuel mapping felt unfinished, leaving riders to wrestle with lag or lurch with no clear pattern. Missed shifts were a common complaint, especially between first and second gear, and the gearbox felt notchy even when new. False neutrals were another sore spot. Riders often found themselves stuck mid-shift, especially during aggressive riding. The gear ratios didn't flow naturally and the engine struggled to maintain smooth power delivery at higher revs. Past 8,000 revolutions per minute, vibration increased and the engine began to sound and feel strained. Overheating was a frequent issue, particularly in city traffic or warm weather. Cooling fans activated late, and once the temperature climbed, power delivery became erratic. Even fuel economy, which averaged near 40 miles per gallon, couldn't redeem the ride. Build quality raised more red flags. Engine casings looked unfinished. Hoses degraded early, and electrical gremlins plagued owners. Idle fluctuated, valves ticked, and component wear appeared early into ownership. The GT 650R wasn't a disaster because of one fatal flaw. It was a death by 1,000 cuts. Inconsistent, poorly refined, and hard to trust, this was a bike that looked the part, but rode like a rough draft. Number 6. Honda DN01. Every so often, a motorcycle comes along that leaves riders wondering who exactly it was made for. The DN01 was one of those machines. It combined the riding posture of a cruiser, the styling hints of a sport bike, and the automatic convenience of a scooter, without excelling in any one category. Power came from a 680 cubic centimeter liquid-cooled V-twin engine that produced approximately 61 horsepower and 45 pound-feet of torque. The braking system featured dual front discs and a single rear disc, enhanced with Honda's combined anti-lock braking system for added safety. Suspension used conventional forks up front and a single rear monoshock. Wet weight clocked in at over 600 pounds and seat height was set around 27.2 inches. When new, the DN01 carried a starting price of roughly $14,500, an eyebrow-raising figure for a machine with modest performance. Where it truly stood apart was its transmission. The DN01 used Honda's human-friendly transmission, a continuously variable hydraulic-mechanical hybrid gearbox. The goal was smooth, gearless riding for beginners or casual riders, but the result was a disconnected, joyless power delivery that lacked urgency or engagement. There were no shifts to feel, no torque curve to ride, just a quiet, continuous hum that dulled the experience. The bodywork, while futuristic, trapped heat near the rider's legs. This made low-speed riding in warm weather uncomfortable, especially in traffic. Acceleration felt soft, and while the bike could reach speeds near 110 miles per hour, it rarely encouraged the effort. It didn't feel like a cruiser, didn't behave like a sport bike, and certainly didn't perform like a scooter with its weight. Fuel economy hovered around 42 miles per gallon, which was decent, but not enough to overcome the bike's bulk and complexity. Maintenance was a concern as well. The unique transmission system required specialized knowledge, and most dealerships weren't equipped to handle it. Parts were scarce, and aftermarket support was nearly non-existent. The DN01 wasn't a total failure. It functioned, but it didn't inspire. Riders didn't connect with it, and it didn't belong anywhere. In Honda's long history of excellence, the DN01 stands as proof that even legends can miss the mark. Number 5. Bimota Vdue. Bimota built its reputation on pairing exotic frames with proven engines, but with the Vdue they tried something different. They decided to develop their own power plant, a 500 cubic centimeter liquid-cooled two-stroke twin-cylinder engine. On paper it was revolutionary. It produced around 110 horsepower and 55 pound-feet of torque, making it one of the most powerful two-stroke motorcycles ever built for the street. Braking was handled by high-spec dual front discs and a single rear disc, while suspension came from top-tier adjustable forks and a rear monoshock, often sourced from race-level suppliers. Dry weight was a svelte 385 pounds with a seat height near 31.5 inches. At launch, the Vdue commanded a premium starting price of approximately $20,000. But the promise of raw two-stroke power met disaster in execution. The centerpiece of the Vdue was its direct fuel injection system, an ambitious feature meant to modernize two-stroke performance. Instead, it became its Achilles heel. Riders experienced bogging, hesitation, misfires, and dangerous surging, especially during throttle transitions. The engine either failed to respond or lurched unpredictably. Throttle control became a gamble. Some bikes stalled mid-corner while others surged forward without warning. Reliability was so poor that out of the first 170 bikes produced, nearly every unit was recalled. Many were retrofitted with carburetors just to make them rideable, undermining the very technology that defined the project. Fuel economy suffered as well, averaging 25 miles per gallon, and oil consumption was equally excessive. Though stunning to look at with sleek Italian bodywork and aggressive lines, the Vdue quickly earned a reputation as an expensive garage ornament rather than a true road machine. For a bike meant to usher in a new era, the Vdue instead collapsed under its own ambition. It bankrupted Bimota, embarrassed early adopters, and turned a visionary project into a cautionary tale. Exotic, yes. Iconic, perhaps. But reliable? Never. Number 4. Norton P10. Ambition can be a dangerous thing, especially when it outruns engineering. That's what happened with Norton's infamous attempt to replace the aging Atlas model. Hiding under the steel was an 800 cubic centimeter double overhead cam parallel twin engine producing around 58 horsepower and 50 pound-feet of torque. The machine came equipped with a single front disc and a rear drum for braking. Suspension duties were handled by standard telescopic forks and twin rear shocks. Wet weight tipped the scales at over 550 pounds with a seat height of roughly 31 inches. At the time of its limited development, the platform carried a price tag that reflected its complexity, around $5,000 adjusted for inflation. But the performance was nowhere near the promise. The engine vibrated violently, and in a misguided attempt to fix that, Norton mounted it in rubber. That decision led to a catastrophic design flaw. Under acceleration, the mounts flexed so much that sprockets would jump chains. reliability quickly evaporated. The mechanical noise was deafening. A nearly 4-foot cam chain created a constant clatter and frequently shed rollers, adding to the engine's reputation for failure. Oil leaks weren't cosmetic, they were structural. Fluid seeped from pushrod tubes, cam covers, and virtually every gasket. Riders described the bike as being in a perpetual state of disassembly. Torque was weak, acceleration flat, and fuel economy unimpressive at around 35 miles per gallon. Despite its theoretical advancements, it failed to outperform the very model it was supposed to replace. Every top-speed run, around 110 miles per hour, felt like a gamble. Even Norton engineers admitted the engine was too heavy, too complex, and too late. By the time riders got their hands on it, the company was already spiraling. What was supposed to be a modern performance leap became an anchor, dragging Norton down with it. The P10 didn't just fall short, it became a warning to the entire industry. Flashy specs on paper mean nothing when reliability fails in practice. Number 3. Amazonas 1600. Some machines seem doomed from the drawing board. This one took a 4-cylinder engine from a Volkswagen Beetle and dropped it into a motorcycle frame, without much consideration for balance, weight, or purpose. The result was a 1,600 cubic centimeter air-cooled flat-4 engine making 54 horsepower and 78 pound-feet of torque. Stopping power came from front and rear disc brakes originally intended for cars. Suspension featured oversized telescopic front forks and dual rear shocks. The total wet weight of the bike pushed past 850 pounds, and seat height was around 29 inches. The launch price in its home market translated to roughly $6,000 today. Performance was laughable. Acceleration was slow, throttle response soft, and overtaking required serious planning. The top speed barely reached 78 miles per hour, which made highway use feel like a risk instead of a right. Handling was equally bad. The engine's placement destroyed weight distribution, making the bike feel clumsy and top-heavy. Low-speed turns were difficult, and fast curves felt outright dangerous. In traffic, the car engine produced so much heat that many riders reported thigh burns or discomfort just idling at a stoplight. The cooling fan whirred constantly, a noisy reminder that the setup was never intended for 2 wheels. Fuel economy hovered around 30 miles per gallon, poor for a motorcycle, especially one so underwhelming. Maintenance was another issue. Few mechanics were equipped or willing to work on such a bizarre hybrid. Even die-hard cruiser fans couldn't overlook the flaws. The Amazonas was heavy, unbalanced, and joyless to ride. It looked imposing but delivered nothing but awkwardness and regret. This wasn't innovation. It was improvisation gone wrong. A car engine shoved into a motorcycle may sound bold, but in execution it proved that not every big idea belongs on the road. Still watching? That means you care about what's real. Subscribe now. We've got more brutal breakdowns coming that every rider should hear. Number 2. Hercules W-2000. Innovation has its place in motorcycle history, but sometimes theory outpaces practicality. That was the case with the rotary-powered oddity developed in the mid-1970s. Underneath its unconventional styling sat a 294 cubic centimeter air-cooled single-rotor Wankel engine producing just 27 horsepower and 25 pound-feet of torque. Braking was managed by a single front disc and rear drum. Suspension featured conventional telescopic forks and twin rear shocks. The wet weight came in at approximately 450 pounds, while seat height stood around 30 inches. When new, this experiment in engineering retailed for roughly $3,200, an expensive price for what it delivered. Despite being the first production motorcycle to use a rotary engine, the W-2000's real-world performance was underwhelming. The power band was flat and lifeless, offering minimal torque and sluggish throttle response. Top speed barely pushed past 75 miles per hour, and getting there took patience. Riders often compared the exhaust note to that of a lawnmower, uninspiring and dull. The unique engine layout produced excess heat that air cooling simply couldn't manage. In slow traffic or warm conditions, the bike radiated discomfort, especially around the rider's legs. Handling was awkward due to the engine's weight distribution, and the chassis didn't help. It felt wide in turns and lacked the agility expected of a bike its size. Even maintenance was tricky. Few shops understood the rotary design, and sourcing parts quickly became a hassle. Fuel economy landed around 42 miles per gallon, which might have been acceptable if the rest of the experience had delivered. Unfortunately, it didn't. The W-2000 was slow, unbalanced, and frustrating to ride for more than short trips. Though innovative on paper, the execution was a mismatch from every angle. Riders didn't embrace the concept, and the market quickly moved on. The rotary engine may have promised the future, but this particular version proved that not every new idea is worth pursuing on two wheels. Number 1. AJS Porcupine. Legends are often built on myth, but this one was built on mechanical fragility. Touted as a triumph of British engineering after World War II, the machine was originally designed with supercharging in mind. When rule changes banned forced induction in 1946, the entire project had to be reimagined. What remained was a four-stroke, 498 cubic centimeter parallel twin that produced around 48 horsepower and 38 pound-feet of torque. The braking system featured drum brakes front and rear, while the suspension used girder-style forks and a basic rear setup typical of the late 1940s. Dry weight hovered around 370 pounds and seat height stood close to 32 inches. In its time, the Porcupine was one of the most expensive racing motorcycles ever developed. On the track, it promised speed but often delivered heartbreak. The engine suffered from chronic oiling issues, valve float, and overheating. Its ignition system was notorious for failing under stress or in damp weather. Starting the bike was often an ordeal requiring a team effort and no shortage of luck. Despite its win at the 1949 World Championship with Les Graham at the controls, many credited the victory more to rider skill than machine excellence. Mechanical failures plagued nearly every race season. Valve springs collapsed, fuel delivery faltered, and ignition timing drifted under vibration. Performance was fragile and inconsistent. The top speed approached 120 miles per hour, but only when the bike decided to behave. Fuel economy varied drastically depending on tuning and engine condition, often around 25 miles per gallon. For a race machine, that mattered less than reliability, and the Porcupine had none. Today, it's preserved in museums and celebrated as a historical curiosity, not a legendary performer. Its magnesium engine cases and horizontal cylinder layout looked advanced, but the technology never matured. The bike's legacy is one of what could have been rather than what was achieved. The Porcupine remains the most infamous example of over-engineering under pressure, a reminder that racing glory means nothing when your machine can't finish the race. Not every bike is a disaster. Some are diamonds in the dust. If you want to know which models collectors are snapping up before prices explode, that's your next ride. And if this video saved you from a regret on wheels, like, comment, and subscribe. We'll keep calling out the lies so you don't pay the price.